Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 19th of December 2017, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And of course, we're back in our traditional format today, and I'm very pleased to be more my normal size. But there we are. Thank you very much to all the viewers who have contacted us to say how much they enjoyed yesterday's changed format. And of course, it was wonderful to have those extra guests in the studio and be talking to Mark Anderson in the US of A. We hope for 2018 to do more of that. But we're ending 2017 with really extraordinary events in UK. Very, very dangerous stuff coming in. And we're going to start off with hate.
Yes, the Home Affairs Select Committee meeting this morning. This is the continuing inquiry into online hate. Yvette Cooper there in the chair, and she was quizzing some representatives from Facebook, Google and Twitter. Quite a bit of the focus was on hate in the sense of people who hated MPs, Brian. So increasingly unsurprising that people tend to hate MPs, but there's a little bit about terrorism and other types of hate crime as well. She was particularly interested in asking the Three Stooges here about their actions that they've taken since the publication of this report. This is the House of Commons Home Affairs Committee, Hate Crime, Abuse, Hate and Extremism Online. This was published in April this year. We covered it at the time. So she asked each of the representatives, to give some idea of what they'd done since this report was published. So first of all, we've got the Facebook representative, who is Simon Milner, Director of Public Policy at Facebook. Now, he said that since the Home Affairs meeting in April, they had added 3,000 staff. They'd taken their staff in the community operations team from 3,000 rather to more than 7,500 people whose jobs is only to review content on Facebook. And on top of that, they're building up a team of 20,000 people to deal with safety and security. So this is quite an impressive, staggering amount of resources they're putting into this. Now, he did push back a little bit on Yvette Cooper when she was asking about content that had been raised in April, which apparently hadn't been taken down to her satisfaction. And he said, well, when they look at taking material down, it's not just whether the material is offensive or not, but it's also the context. So, for example, he's saying, in fact, all of them were saying the same thing. It's extremely difficult to automate removing material from these platforms because, for example, news organizations might be using the same material to put forward a particular narrative, and they don't want to affect that, and so on. Twitter, well, the lady from Twitter, she said that Twitter has employing 10 times more staff than they had in April to deal with accounts that are putting out difficult content for them. She was given a pretty hard time by Yvette Cooper because apparently in April, Twitter had identified to them some specific tweets that the government wanted to see taken down, or the Select Committee rather wanted to see taken down, and they turned up at this meeting without having taken them down, and these were tweets apparently which were offensive to MPs. So Twitter, for some reason, hadn't taken them down, and that wasn't terribly satisfactory to the Home Affairs Committee. And then Google stroke YouTube, they said that they're increasing their staff for dealing with these issues from 4,500 people to 10,000 people. They said they're putting huge amounts of resource into machine learning and AI. But they said that the final judgment on this is made by a human being. But the other thing that they admitted to in this is something that we have suspected or believed for a long time. And they have admitted in their evidence today that they do flag certain certain content providers, and once those content providers are flagged, that they are downgraded in terms of appearing in related videos, links, and so on. So they are admitting to active censorship based on not necessarily individual pieces of content, but content providers as a whole, Brian?
This doesn't surprise me at all. I think it's worth dealing with this issue of hate. Of course, what is the definition of hate? The government is trying to introduce definitions. These are ever broader. So that's a danger itself. Are people starting to hate their MPs? I think that's correct. And I think it's a shame, because what we really should have is appropriate anger. Anger is a suitable human emotion on occasions, and provided that doesn't translate into violence, we've got a useful human emotion. So people are beginning to look at their MPs. They realise that MPs are not doing their job. They've got no morality. They've got no courage to stand up and be counted. So a lot of passion is coming onto the social media networks. But what does the government do? Says, well, oh, this is terrible. This is hate. And we've now got to attempt to filter this out. But the other thing I wanted to pick up on there, you're saying that the firms are saying it's difficult to use some form of algorithm to take out this so-called hate speech, and it might be too close to what the mainstream media are saying. I think this shows that actually the social media on many occasions is absolutely mature, because they are using clips from the media to show and prove what is really taking place. So instead of it just being gossip, you've now got more and more factual information circulating, which is causing a problem for the machines.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that they reminded of Ed Cooper was that the three main organisations had created the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism, and of course, it is amazing how they attempt to conflate terrorism with hate speech, with merely material that they don't want to see on the internet. But here we go. This is what they've done, and there's the thing that I find of particular concern here is that the three big social media networks, Google, Facebook, and Twitter, are using this platform to provide best practice for smaller organizations. So what we're going to see is their technology and their ways of dealing with this problem, in inverted commas, filtering down to smaller competition. And of course, they don't really have any competition of any size. So that means that people that maybe are being having difficulty getting their positions across because they're being censored by the big players are looking at some of the smaller up and coming networks as a place to get their information out.
Yep.
And what this is saying is, no, we're going to sort that problem out as well. And the other thing was that they said that they would be actively redirecting people. So if people were searching for information on a particular subject and maybe had shown some preponderance to look at particular sources of information, that in future, maybe when they went to try and look at those particular sources, they would be redirected to better sources, and so
more appropriate
truth.
Yeah.
And that's coming soon to a laptop near you.
This is very, very dangerous. This is very dangerous precedent because we've got the truth now being hidden by government propaganda. This is not the propaganda machine, of course, of Russia. This is not the propaganda machine of Eastern Europe or even China, we're seeing. This is propaganda and censorship, which is coming in through the British government, and it's also coming in through Western governments. How can we show it in action? Well, we thought we'd come to this amazing article by the Guardian. Here's the headline: How Syria's White Helmets Became Victims of an Online Propaganda Machine. Now, I'm absolutely going to encourage people to get online and seek out this Guardian article, because you must read it for yourself. I hope we're going to give you some pointers at things that you should look for, but this is an incredible piece of crafting of the news. So let's have a look at how this actually works, and just bear with me as I call it up on the other screen here. So we've got the Syrian volunteer rescue workers, known as the White Helmets, have become the target of an extraordinary disinformation campaign that positions them as an Al-Qaeda-linked terrorist organisation. The Guardian has uncovered how this counter-narrative is propagated online by a network of anti-imperialist activists, conspiracy theorists and trolls with the support of the Russian government, brackets, which provides military support to the Syrian regime. So there's a lot of stuff in there that if you dare to question the narrative that the British government puts out, or indeed the Guardian, that phrase anti-imperialist activists.
Yes.
Is the Guardian
pro-imperialist?
Yeah.
Yeah, they must be.
Well, I don't know. It's confusing, isn't it? So this is an extremely dangerous document because of the way it attempts to mislead the public. And we thought we ought to go straight to the source. Let's have a look at the young lady who has actually written this article, Olivia Solon. We can find out a certain amount about her, and I think that's an important thing to do. So she says, senior editorial roles with Wired UK, Mirror. That's a pretty impressive medal to be wearing, isn't
Absolutely,
it?
yes.
She's worked for the Mirror and Bloomberg Business Europe, so into the establishment there. And then she's very pleased that she's had articles published amongst this little lot: Guardian, New Scientist, Wired, Telegraph, Business Life, FTcom, Glamour, Elle, Marketing Week and Music Week. So it's quite interesting, and my curiosity started, well, hang on a minute, where is her Middle Eastern experience? Where is her experience of war zone?
Conflict? Yeah.
Conflict, where is her experience of the real mechanics of what's going on over the internet? But we'll just give you a little bit more here. So she says that basically she's well practiced in speaking and moderating at events around the world, include Wired 2013, the Pioneers Festival, Maidem, Advertising Week, How the Lights Get In, and the Festival of Media. I've commented on issues relating to digital culture and technology for broadcasters such as Bloomberg, BBC, Channel 4, Radio 4, Sky News, BBC London, Reuters and G4 TV. So this lady has done a lot of establishment work, but she's only been commenting on net-related digital issues.
Yes.
I can't see the background, the in-depth professional background for deep analysis, but she has been commenting. And if you want to see a little bit more from her, then you can come on to this one. So she's got previous jobs. Guardian News. I did phone the Guardian this morning, and they were a bit unsure as to who she was initially. They then said to me, is she freelance? And I said, well, I think she was, but I think she's working for the Guardian. The very helpful lady was not sure whether she was paid Guardian staff, but I was given an email address. And if you look at the pedigree there, it's all freelance stuff. We've got the deputy editor of Wired.co. University of Oxford, always a classic medal there, Mike, 2-1 in Spanish and philosophy. That's not exactly deep digital data networks. No. Okay, so we thought we'd have a look at how this article did its work. So let me just pull this up on screen, and we'll come into this first one here. So we have the article opening with unsupported propaganda statement that the White Helmet counter-narrative is anti-imperialist, conspiracy theorists and trolls supported by the Russian government. And then they quickly follow that up with paragraphs of unsupported mainstream media statements of positive international recognition of the White Helmets. So what the press has been saying, what the international press has been saying about the has been saying about the White Helmets is immediately presented as if it was evidence-based.
Yes.
But very positive narrative put into the reader's mind straight away. Let's bring in the next bit here. We then get a reinforcing paragraph stating it's all the Russian propaganda machine, but the evidence for this is simply from an author who's written a book, and the gentleman concerned is David Patrick Karakos. So in the article, as far as I could see, there was no factual evidence whatsoever to say that this was a Russian propaganda campaign.
Right.
I'm going to read the article again very carefully, but having looked at it prior to the news, I could not see this evidence. It all hung on the comment of this one man. So we bring in the next bit. This is where it starts to get clever. It says those nasty Russians have scooped up anti-American activists, bloggers and researchers, giving them a Russian media platform.
Really?
So this is Russia being driven into people's heads, but they're claiming that anybody who dares question the white helmets is actually working for the Russians. And this is quite interesting because we then have a gentleman used as an expert, Scott Lucas, the professor of international politics. That should be Birmingham University. And he described the overall campaign as agitation propaganda. Participants don't realise they're being used as pawns. But when I spoke to Mr. Lucas on the phone earlier today, one of the things that amazed me was that he had no personal experience on the ground in Syria.
He had never actually been there?
I was unsure whether that was the case, Mike, but it appeared to be. I need to look at my notes again. But he was very, very nervous the moment I started to say, have you actually been on the ground in the war zone looking at the work of the white helmets? He said he hadn't, but he was relying on sources. He said, I have sources in the war zone.
Would those be Al-Qaeda sources?
Well, we don't know. We can have a look into those. But isn't it remarkable that an expert used to try and undermine somebody like Vanessa Beeley, who has been on the ground, had not been on the ground himself? A very interesting conversation, and I'll certainly give more of that as soon as I can. Where does that take us? Well, we reinforce the propaganda for the good works of the white helmets with a big plus that they documented the chemical attack in Khan Sakun. So the fact that the white helmets said something about chemical weapons, they are the real thing, Mike.
Yes.
Can't challenge them.
Yes, and of course the subsequent UN investigation didn't actually go to Khan Shaykhun to get any evidence themselves.
No, and there is no evidence produced in this document about chemical weapons at all.
Right.
And we would say, because there isn't any, that directly pins this on the Assad regime. So let's bring in the next one. And that is that with no evidence of their own, The Guardian promotes the views of researchers who are apparently studying the spread of disinformation and propaganda online. And they quote a gentleman called Phil Mentzer's tool Hoaxy, which tracks misinformation. So we've now jumped from where is the evidence for misinformation to the fact we have a tool which tracks something which hasn't been defined.
Right.
I hope people are still with me. I'm trying to be as concise with this as possible. They also mention another analytics firm called Graphica. Graphica is interesting because its work has been commissioned by the Syria campaign.
That's the Syria campaign which created the white helmets?
Yes, so that's
Yes.
a little bit circular, Mike.
Yes.
A little bit circular, but The Guardian doesn't want to tell us
But in
that.
the spirit of 2017, that's pretty independent research there.
Pretty independent. So what we then do is say that Mentzer's Hoaxy and Graphica and a lady called Kate Starbird from the University of Washington have identified Vanessa Beeley and 21st Century Wire as the most influential disseminators of fake news on the white helmets. So there's no analysis of the evidence that Vanessa has put forward with 21st Century Wire. We're now beginning to spin the whole story.
Yes, and this is consistently the case. The message is never attacked. It's always the messenger. So you've got to ask the question, Brian, why is the message itself never attacked? It's, to my mind, quite clear that it's because they are not in a position to attack it.
Truth is a very powerful thing, isn't it, Mike? So let's bring in the bottom chunk here. So at the end of the article, they get heavily into what they call the mannequin challenge. And what is this? This is nothing else than a character assassination, mainly of Vanessa Beeley. And I've said here, at no stage does Olivia Solon or The Guardian ever produce counter evidence to undermine the evidence and analysis of Vanessa Beeley and 21st Century Wire. Indeed, The Guardian admits in this article that terrorists have been operating inside the white helmets. It's a sentence which is a couple of sentences towards the very end of the article where you say, hang on a minute, here is the Guardian admitting that terrorists were operating inside this organisation. And my brain says, well, oh, are they still operating inside? But there is no analysis by the Guardian. So if people want to see how mainstream press, the Guardian, this particular journalist, Olivia Solon, how they can craft an article to mislead the public, you need to read this one. But double standards, I'm afraid, Mike, because if you attempt to check up on this lady and what she really thinks, the first thing you find is that her Twitter account is blocked. So don't think you're going to see what she's really saying, because she's going to censor you. So believe what I say, except when I censor you from knowing what I say.
Or, well, at least you don't get any opportunity to give her any opinion back.
No, well, goodness me, we can't have that sort of thing going on, Mike. Now let's bring in Scott Lucas. This is the man I spoke to before. By his accent, I would guess he was an American. He's the man who's made the statement in the article, Agitation Propaganda. When I asked him whether he believed that all of this was orchestrated by the Russians, he seemed to indicate that he absolutely did. I pressed him very firmly on what was his experience on the ground, his personal experience on the ground. He got very, very nervous, and subsequently he put the phone down on me. So
another one?
Yeah. So it's unfortunate that when you question these individuals as to what the real substance behind them is, they get a little bit spooked. So we'll follow through the dangers of this, because if we look at this journalist again, I came across this article, and I find this one of the, I'm going to say, scariest articles I have seen in some time, Mike. We've got Karim the AI delivers psychological support to Syrian refugees. And what this article is saying is that millions, hundreds of thousands, millions fleeing the war, the carnage, the bloodshed, the death in Syria. These are traumatized people, but we're now using AI machines which can text conversations to people who are beginning to suffer PTSD. Of course, AI is tied in with profit. And this is all promoted by this very same journalist. So part of this article says Eugene Ban, the co-founder and CTO of X2AI, says there are barely any mental health services in refugee camps. People have depression, anxiety, a sense of hopelessness and fear of the unknown. To get Karim into the hands of refugees and aid workers, X2AI has teamed up with a non-governmental organisation called Field Innovation Team, which delivers tech-enabled disaster relief.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but AI is very much in its experimental stages. So what is going on here is that Eugene Ban appears to be delighted to have a captive audience of lab rats, of 1 million or so lab rats, in refugee camps that he can test and experiment on for future profit.
Immensely vulnerable people. They're vulnerable to the AI technology. They're vulnerable to what these NGOs are really doing. But as you say, what really drives AI? Is it the love of mankind, or is it profit? And I'll bring this lady up because she's mentioned in this article, and I just found this incredible. Here is his lady involved with this field initiative team, and Desiree, and she's heavily into the work of FEMA in America.
Yeah.
And do you like that picture? Do you like that image? I don't get a warm feeling from this, but we can't get into the truth about what the white helmets are and the fact that we know there's terrorists operating amongst them. We're into making a bit more profit out of AI off the back of Syrian refugees. I'm going to stop there because I found myself becoming more and more uncomfortable as I looked into this Guardian article this morning. I'm going to end by saying, please read it and please look at what this reporter is really saying. And if you agree with the concerns in our analysis, then please email her and let's take this lady on in a polite, reasonable way.
Okay, Brian, Queen Elizabeth is leaking, apparently. This is HMS Queen Elizabeth, of course, the aircraft carrier. She is leaking. Now, apparently, it's quite interesting because they've known that she's been leaking for quite some time. Apparently 200 litres per hour coming into the boat, as you said, through a prop shaft seal. But they went ahead with the commissioning ceremony in any case. So this, of course, is being...
Well, they had to go ahead with it because they're out doing sea trials, but of course they've ramped up this ship to be the saviour of UK and UK defence. And they've made such a monster out of it that to actually admit this thing is probably going to have to go back into dry dock to have these seals replaced or repaired, but I suspect replaced. They just can't face the publicity over this. So we've got a new build ship. Do new build ships get problems? Yes. But we've got a major problem here on this ship, which they're saying, well, we're not going to deal with it at the moment, but later my suspicion is that aircraft carrier will have to go back into dry dock to have this sorted out. Would this be such a big issue if all of the rest of the Royal Navy was operating properly? The answer would probably be maybe not. But we've now got Type 45 warships that are not at sea due to engine problems, overheating problems. We've got nuclear submarines not at sea due to machinery problems, lack of spares, lack of trained people. So this is just the icing on the cake. But I wonder whether you could pop back to the picture of the two on board the carrier that you had there, because I'm pretty sure that what the Defence Secretary is saying is it true there's a hole in your bottom?
Right. Okay. Well, I have to say the mainstream media coverage of this has been spectacular. Here's a typical headline from the Express: exposed. Queen's new £3.1 billion warship sinking as critics slam MOD for getting mugged off. Now, 200 litres an hour, Brian, on a ship with this displacement, how long would it take to sink, do you think?
Well, it probably wouldn't, Mike, due to compartmentalisation of warships. So if we look at this thing, however, problems with propeller shafts on board warships or even a merchant ship is a significant problem, because eventually you're going to go into problems with overheating of bearings and shafts. You're going to end up with distortion of the propeller shaft, and then you are into absolute major repairs. So this is one of these things. What's the old saying? Something for saving the ship for a ha'porth of tar. This is it. This is a small thing at the moment, very significant though, and they're trying to fob it off.
And then we have the other response, which is typical of this tweet here. Sad to see so many relishing HMS Queen Elizabeth's very minor leak. Even seen one person trying to say it's proof we shouldn't be leaving the EU. Reality is sea trials are supposed to put ship through paces to identify exactly this sort of issues. This issue, not disaster, some are claiming it is.
Well, this is, can't read it from here. I think it's James Happy MP,
That's right, yeah.
James Happy MP. So this is misinformation for the public, because the critical fact here is this is another unit, another new major unit coming into the fleet that is not fit for purpose. We could start discussing the aircraft at this point, but this is symptomatic of major problems inside the Royal Navy at the moment. This is not accidental. All of these problems are the result of engineered policy within the Royal Navy.
Well, let's speak about aircraft, because the 14th useless F-35 has now been delivered. This is the final F-35 for the first batch in the British fleet for this ship. That has been delivered to Southern California, where they're being tested at the moment, because that's the best place to test aircraft that are going to be deployed to sea, is in the desert.
Well, a lot of this, Mike, is of course they've got to go there because it's all locked into the to the global defence companies that are producing this beast. But of course, the other thing is that all of this technological know-how no longer exists in the United Kingdom, because it's been stripped out. So we are now beholden on a foreign company to provide the whole of our air defence requirements at sea. This is very serious stuff, and we've got to stay on the case.
Okay, the Conservative Party pushed this out today. Britain's record on job creation is second to none, and this year's survey shows that this is set to continue in 2018, according to Neil Carberry from the CBI, as more than half of businesses plan to take on more staff next year. So the Conservative Party crowing about their employment record. And well, we didn't get a chance to cover the recent unemployment figures. And this just sort of inspired me to have another look at it, because this is pretty obscene. At no point in any discussion about jobs from any politicians actually, but particularly from the Conservative Party, is there any discussion of the types of jobs or the quality of jobs? It's just jobs. What sort of jobs are being created at the moment? This is a very important point in my mind.
Well, the moment you ask that, Mike, shelf stacking comes to my mind. The jobs that aren't being created are proper apprenticeship jobs, proper skilled jobs, where young people in particular are being given skills training that's going to see them through a whole career, and ultimately their efforts are going to produce worthwhile products for the United Kingdom.
Well, that certainly isn't going to happen, as we're going to see in a second. So let's. This was the main graph from the Office for National Statistics. It shows that the unemployment rate fell a little bit to 4.3% in the months to October 2017. The employment rate fell by a little bit, so 75.1 people in employment apparently. The level of employment fell by 50,000 for men and 6,000 for women, and there were other equally useless statistics. But I thought this was an interesting one, because, you know, we've got an increase in the number of people moving from employment to unemployment, an increase in the number of people moving from employment to inactivity. These are people that are considered to be economically inactive. We've got a reduction in the number of people moving from unemployment to employment, from unemployment to, well, you can see it goes on. Basically, nothing has changed actually, because if you net all those bars out, it really doesn't make very much difference. It didn't stop the Conservative Party telling us what a great job they were doing, but this is the key point. What are the types of jobs? As we can see, manufacturing, Brian. Very, very small proportion of people finding work in manufacturing. Most people are finding work in services jobs or in useless jobs. So it's the quality of the jobs that I think is important. And when we see all the headlines that we've seen in the last 2 or 3 months about this productivity issue that we have in this country, this is a reflection of the types of jobs that are being created. And so it was a bit ironic that a few days ago the government published a nice big paper on opportunities for the steel industry. Now, of course, steel needed for manufacturing, but we don't do much manufacturing in this country anymore. But anyway, they published this document of opportunities for steel, £3.8 billion worth of opportunities. These are not contracts that are being awarded. These are opportunities that the steel industry in this country can bid for. This is independent research, they say, into high value opportunities for the UK steel industry. So let's just have a look at some of them. And what do we find here? Well, if we look at Hinkley Point C, for example, this project has a large and varied demand for steel. This includes around 200,000 tonnes of reinforcement in concrete structures, over 600,000 plates and various other types of things. Now the question is, with the Hinkley Point project, is that steel going to come from Britain or is it going to come from China? I think I know the answer to that. Then we go on down the list, and what do we find? Well, the value of the opportunities is unknown at this stage. The scheme is in approval stage. So actually these aren't opportunities at all, because they are projects that may never happen. Appraisal stage, sorry, I apologise. And so it goes on. Value not known. This is for all the defence contracts. The value of the contracts is not known. Are these contracts actually going to appear? This to me, Brian, absolutely reflects the so-called infrastructure pipeline, which the government published during the year much earlier in the year, where if you actually look through the projects that are in the infrastructure pipeline, 90% of them are unfunded. The government is expecting the private sector to provide the funding for these infrastructure projects, so they don't actually exist. These are, and it's the same with this. So the steel industry is going to get the opportunity, apparently, to apply for contracts which may or may not come about.
Well, I think we've also got to mention the Kinnock family. So, of course, Neil and Glynis Kinnock, supposedly staunch Labour, the people who should be looking after a proper workforce. But it was their son, Stephen Kinnock, who was busy liaising with Tata Steel when the South Wales steel plant was in a precarious position. So what we see is Britain's own politicians simply going overseas and arranging deals when what they should be doing is supporting workers at home in the community.
Well, I mean, it's worse than that, Brian, because the Daily Mail last year reported that Britain had blocked an EU bid to raise the tariff on Chinese steel because Britain wants to import steel from China. We had the Times saying that Britain will be a target for steel dumping by China. And we had the Mirror saying that building Britain's warships with foreign steel is a shameful snub to UK workers.
Sorry, it's not a snub, Mike, is it? Because actually it destroys their jobs.
Absolutely.
That's what it does.
Absolutely.
So this is Mirror spin, but at least that Guardian reporter was pleased that she'd been working for the Mirror.
Yes. Absolutely. So, we got to change this in 2018. We got to get refocused on our productivity and the types of jobs that we create and make them much higher value jobs, give people a proper salary
training
and proper training.
Yeah, and then we start to get somewhere. Now, we'll just say, I think this is appropriate. I'm going to put Mike back on screen here. He's alongside Vanessa Beeley. Really want to say, wonderful work from Vanessa, and isn't it fascinating that the good work of Vanessa Beeley with 21st Century Wire, and I hope a little bit of input from the UK column, has resulted in The Guardian having to run this appallingly written assassination piece on the work of Vanessa Beeley. So we have a journalist who has, it would appear, not been on the ground in that war zone. Certainly she's using experts that haven't been on the ground in the war zone to see what the facts are. She sits in a cosy office in London or San Francisco, I'm not sure where, and character assassinates Vanessa Beeley. I feel very, very annoyed about this, and I think the Guardian and that particular reporter should be held to account. Mm-hmm. But what can we see? We can see that so powerful has been the reporting over Syria in particular, I suspect also defence and some other issues, that we now see the British government attempting to bully internet companies into censoring social and alternative media. And of course, if we allow the British government to get away with this, then truth goes out the window, and we are going to be marching even quicker into this, I'm going to call it a fascist state. I think it's becoming easier to see.
Yeah.
So we're going to say well done to Patrick Henningsen, Vanessa Beeley for all that good work. We're also going to say well done to all the other people who are putting out properly researched material on the internet. And isn't it a wonderful end for 2017 to see that there are shakes in the establishment because of that effort. Now, we'd like to end by thanking all of the people that have been long-term supporters of the UK column. We always appreciate all the donations and subscriptions that come in. Indeed, this morning there was a knock on the door and a motorcyclist appeared in some very interesting riding gear to thrust some notes into our hand, and he said, I had to call in because you'd actually asked people who were not yet subscribing to subscribe. So that was really wonderful, and thank you for that visit. We would like to say, if you want UK column to expand, if you'd like to see more of the broader format programs that we did with that example yesterday, then please support us when we start to say we need to upgrade, and we're going to need to ask for a significant increase in income to expand what we do. But we'll talk about that in 2018. That's it from us.
Are we going to say Happy Christmas?
We're going to say Happy Christmas.
Or should we say Merry Christmas?
Happy and Merry Christmas. We will be back on the 3rd of January 2018. We look forward to seeing you, but please bring some friends. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.